diversity, and one of the things I want to talk about is bias. And it's kind of interesting that we're actually here at the Grand Hyatt on 42nd Street because an interesting thing happened to me in my past life. And when I say past life, I'm not talking about regression or anything like that. I meant in an actual life. Before I became a professor and a dean and what have you of engineering, I used to be a performer. I used to sing with a vocal group in the cabaret circuit down in New York. And about 1 mile away from here, an interesting thing happened to me and a buddy of mine. We grew up together in Brownsville, Brooklyn. His name is Nelson. We were rehearsing, and I want to get your feedback on this little anecdote here. We were rehearsing downtown here, and as we finished the rehearsal, we were walking along 42nd Street, and we're walking west. As you walk west on 42nd Street, between 9th and 10th, you have this very wide street called Dyer Street. And that street is where the cars that are coming usually from New Jersey, I live in Jersey now, with Jersey drivers, and it's 4 lanes wide. It's a very, very wide sort of intersection. So Nelson and I are sort of engrossed in our conversation. We're talking about the rehearsal and we're talking about the gig that we're going to have later on that night. And so we're talking to each other. And so as we're walking across this very wide intersection and you have cars all lined up and backed up as far as the eye can see, we hear this noise like thunk. And as we're walking faster and faster, thunk, 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 thunk. We said, what the heck is that? We turned around, and what was happening was people were locking their doors as he, and he happens to be black, and if you notice, so am I, were walking across the street. Well, first of all, I was sort of taken back by how loud that was. I mean, you're in New York, this intersection is busy, you have all this noise, and we're able to hear this sort of sound. Yeah, well, actually, what we did was first, we've been black a long time, so we're used to these micro inequities and what have you. So we were actually tickled by it. In fact, we were fascinated by it. And we walked right back across and did it again. I'm giving you an anecdotal sort of thing. And a number of things happen in a situation like that. One, why did the folks do what they did? And two, how do you respond to that sort of thing? Now, Nelson and I, we're sort of used to that sort of thing. And was not, we weren't indignant and we didn't go start shaking our fingers and yelling and pounding on people's doors and windows and say, how dare you, I work for a living and all that other sort of stuff. And maybe if they could have gotten out their cars, we could have had a teachable moment. And we could explain to you, actually, I'm really a nice guy and I'm really, working very hard and I'm not trying to rob you or steal you. But what it does speak to, and here's the thing, we all have and make assumptions based on our own experiences. So if you want to change the diversity in your schools or in your program or in your office, it really has to be a personal and conscious decision to do so. It is personal. There's no question about it because we are a collection of all the things, that we experience, right or wrong. I don't think that those were evil people. I don't think that they necessarily hate black people or what have you. They're probably very nice people. In fact, that's one of the challenges is how do we get nice people to challenge themselves and to do the right thing. So this is a good segue into it. And so what I plan to do here in this section is that I just gave you a little anecdote, a real life one, and I'm sure all of us here have tons of these, and each of you probably, even white men, probably get, biased treatment. But you're at the top of the food chain, so, you won't get the sympathy thing, as much. But we want to help you out here. So what I would like to do in this section here is to, obviously we want to get our diverse campuses. We want to get a strong and talented faculty pool. And, one of the ways that we do that is that, our search committees, and that, when I say search committee, I'm using it in a very generic sort of sense because really when you talk about your hiring process, everyone is really involved in that in some form or fashion, whether it's the dean, the chair, the provost, your chief financial officer, your faculty, your students, all of them sort of play into that. So this thing about bias and how do we make this happen is really a cultural thing for your campus. And so how do we get there? Well, one way to do that, and how do we take this huge problem and then narrow it down into small bits? And so I'm just going to focus on this very small thing so that you can have something. We want you to have take-home, something that you can actually use. And so one of the things that you would want to do is to train as best you can your search committees. But if your schools are like my schools, your search committees are faculty members that are too busy, say, I want release time. Are y'all giving them release time to do searches? Talk to me, deans. Tell the truth, shame the devil. No, okay, right. And so a lot of times this is done in a stressful sort of situation. The faculty says, well, I'm doing the very best. I got to do my research, got to teach, and all this other sort of stuff. And now you want me to sit and look at this? Yeah, I do. Because this is going to be your colleague, and you're going to be either complaining about this person or working with this person. And so you got to pitch it to them this way that, hey, you want me to do it? And then you'll come back and say, well, I'm a dean, and now the dean has decided administration is putting their big hand down on me. In fact, it's a funny sort of thing. When I made the switch to become an associate dean, one of my colleagues had said to me, you've crossed over to the dark side, And so already you have this sort of wall between you and the faculty, and the idea is to bring them into that process. So the goals here are basically to focus on some roles of unconscious bias in our review process, meaning focusing on, how do we evaluate CVs, or even transcripts for that matter, but we're dealing mostly with faculty here. And I want to share some of the research, by the folks like sociologists and psychologists that do this sort of work. One place in particular is the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the Wesley or Wisely program that's called, I think it's the Women in Science and Engineering Leadership Institute. And they do some really great work. And in fact, there's a cornucopia of resources out there to help us deal with these issues. I mean, really good stuff and stuff that you can actually use. And so I want to share some of that with you. Then ultimately promote some of the strategies, and they'll be real straightforward that you can just sort of write down, and you can have this PowerPoint after I'm done with it. And then I want to test you. We'll do a test case, so put you working, because this is a workshop, right? Is it a workshop? Okay. How about you, sir, in the back there? You look very serious. Yes. Yeah, no, he keeps turning around. Now, I just want to make sure I got everyone involved. Okay, so we're going to move on. What is bias, right? So bias is an inclination towards something, or predisposition, partiality, prejudice, preference, or predilection. I know you know that, but sometimes it helps to kind of hear it out loud. And are we completely objective when we do evaluations? Now, most of us are either researchers or academicians, and we spend our lives dealing with what? The facts, the outcomes from our research. So clearly we know how to take objective information and make objective decisions about anything that we do. Is that correct? That was not rhetorical. Are we always objective in our evaluations of our... Okay, I realize. I don't want you to... Are you pleading the fifth? No, we're not. And actually, because we all have our biases. And so we want to talk about ways, one, first to identify them, what they are, and then to sort of work against them. And so one of the things that we see that in a lot of the research that's been done in this area about bias, that particularly when it comes to gender, men and women don't differ too much. So what that means is that women, well, you kind of look, this is like sort of a pecking order. You have at the top of that white males, particularly in the STEM areas. Then you may have just males in general, and then you have women, and then you have women of color. And the one on the bottom gets beat up not only by men, but by women. That is, women are catching hell. And I think the statistics that Bev had put up earlier supports that. We like data. That supports that. And so how do we flip that script? How do we change that thing around? And so we want to talk about ways in which we can sort of do that. And so here are some of the different types of assumptions that we make about people, about physical and social characteristics, gender, ethnicity, job types, academic institutions, fields of studies. And a lot of this information I got from a pamphlet that is put out by the Wisely group there. And, very hands-on sort of thing. And it makes me reflect back to my 42nd Street incident. So the moral of the story is still 42nd Street, people will close and lock their doors on you. So when you're doing an evaluation or any of those sorts of things, embrace your biases. There have been studies where they've asked people, are you biased? And so, of course, or better yet, are you totally objective? And people says, no, I am totally objective about everything. I have no biases. And then you will have some people that will say, yes, I have some biases, and these are what they are. And when they went to test this group of folks, they found that the people who claim to have no bias tend to be more biased than the people who say yes. And why? Because they're aware of it, they act on it, and that's what you need to do as an individual. Identify what are things you like and don't like. That doesn't make you an evil person. You know, making assumptions does not make you an evil person. You know, you want to sit down in a chair, it's reasonable to assume that gravity still pulls you down, you sit down. You know, but you have to verify that, you know, with physical fact. We're scientists and engineers and what have you, so we want to use that to its great advantage. So we need to challenge our preconceived notions and ideas about people, about our candidates, and even about ourselves. In fact, when you go through and evaluating someone, it really helps for you to sort of reflect and do a self-assessment and say, okay, am I being fair? You know, am I truly looking at the information that's put forth to me or the criteria? So I'm going to give you some examples from the research that's given. They'll have the references, and that's the cool thing I like about it. I gave you an anecdotal sort of scenario, you know, with my 42nd Street incident, but folks who do this for a living, you know, sociologists and psychologists, do this sort of thing, have done a lot of research, and I mean, it's unbelievable how much research is out there. And the interesting thing about it is that some of the results are intuitive, that we kind of know, because we all are kind of like, you know, shady tree sociologists and psychologists. We all think we know something about that until you talk to a real one, you know, and then you find what little you probably don't know. But anyway, they are back this up with research. And so here are some of them on social assumptions and expectations. So when shown the photograph of men in similar body types, evaluators related the athletic ability of African American men higher than that of white men. That's the white man can't jump mentality. Is that shocking to any of you? Come on, come on. Some coaches have lost their jobs, right? By making references to these sorts of things that are ingrained. And why do these things happen? Because, you know, our media and just everything that we learn. You said earlier, and I appreciate you saying you come from a rural area, so you come to the city. Well, I got another one for you. I got some people that live in Brooklyn, says I ain't going to Manhattan. And they black folks. So it's equal opportunity, these biases about each other. So it's not just white men and all that, it's everyone is involved in this sort of thing. So everyone has to own their part of this thing. When asked to choose counselors from among a group of equally competent applicants who were neither exceptionally qualified nor unqualified for the position, students more often chose white candidates than African American candidates, indicating their willingness to give members of the majority group the benefit of the doubt. Is that a surprise to anyone here? How many people are surprised? Raise your hand. How many people are not? Raise your hand. Okay. A bunch of students. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, to tell you the truth, they didn't differentiate whether it was white students. It's probably just students. So you have some black students in there probably too, and some Latino students and that sort of thing. Yeah. And what this is really about, generalizations are dangerous, you know. I mean, one generalization that I remember is that, you know, all Asians are like super geniuses, you know, and I mean, that's a positive one, but it's just not true. I mean, and we have to be careful about all these sorts of generalizations. In fact, when you generalize, that's when it gets most dangerous. And so that is one thing to fight against. So let me see if I can speed up a little bit. Application biases. This is where we sort of kick in. When writing the verbal skills as indicated by vocabulary definitions, evaluators rated the skills lower if they were told an African American provided the definitions than if they were told that a white person provided them. Go on to the next one. I call that what's in the name. I think this is almost funny, but it is very true. Randomly assigning different names to resumes showed that job applicants with white-sounding names were more likely to be interviewed for open positions than were equally qualified applicants with African-American sounding names. So what's the difference between Jaquita and Jane, or Jamil and John? And these things bring certain sort of baggage, and so we have to fight. And once again, all of us, black, brown, green, yellow, I don't know about green people, they're probably ill, but we have to fight against our predilections about folks and get to the heart of the matter. Are they qualified? And are they, and I use this loosely, a good fit. Now, good fit is a dangerous word because it's wide open, and that's often used as a way to get out of bringing people in that really are the people that you need to do the job. And here's bias in academic jobs. A study of R01 grants. I have no idea what an R01 grant is because I usually go to NSF, but any people do National Institute stuff? Okay. I thought I could just learn something about that. But, okay, grants awarded by the National Institute of Health found that despite controlling for educational background, publication records, and other factors, African Americans were 10 percentage points less likely than whites to receive funding. That's some serious business, particularly if you're a young faculty member, trying to make your way. It makes it tough. And once again, this is backed by research. This is not anecdotal in the, a sad story that we're hearing. In a national study, 238 academic psychologists, we won't hold that against them, evaluated a curriculum vitae, randomly assigned a male or female name. Both male and female participants gave the male applicant, and here both male and female, gave the male applicant better evaluations for teaching, research, and service experience, and were more likely to hire the male than the female applicant. That is some scary stuff if you're a woman. Where do you go for help? Your sister's not even helping you out. So we have to weigh all of that. Okay, here's some recommendations. And this will wrap this up, and then we'll come to the audience participation part. Okay. Recommendations to reduce the influence of bias. In fact, I'll come back to this. Let's go to a case study. This case study I received from, this is from the Council of Colleges of Arts and Sciences. They have a website. You have Dr. Jennifer Schneider, who's very, very helpful. I called her up. She sent me this stuff, and there's just a ton of stuff that you can do. You can take tests on your bias if you dare. You can do that online. A lot of stuff is online. Okay, good. Yeah, because I did like about 60 of them, and there's not 60 of you. So, but you're mighty and you're strong. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through this thing, and I'm going to have you work amongst yourself. So those of you who are kind of isolated might want to find a friend, because I'm going to ask you to answer some questions. So we're going to do this one. This is a popular one, the recruitment scenario at Teachers Scholars University. The Department of Biology at Teacher Scholar University, TSU, is nearing the end of a faculty search in which 3 candidates have interviewed on campus. The first candidate has generated little enthusiasm among stakeholders, while the others have backers. Candidate Morris Moore, who has completed a postdoctoral appointment, has the slightly stronger publication record of the two. His jocular style resonated well with the senior faculty, but his research seminar was poorly organized and hard to follow. Now comes into the scene is Rhea Served, a recent PhD recipient, presented her research coherently in this seminar and has more teaching experience than Moore, an important consideration given TSU's mission. However, Moore's backers describe her as a little mousy and maybe too green, and question her overall fit, that word fit, within the department. Now, we have another character that's coming in on this scenario. The department's faculty was voted in favor, the department's faculty has voted in favor of Moore, although not by a large margin. The vote is technically advisory. However, past chairs have almost always accepted the faculty recommendation and forwarded it to the dean, that's you, who makes all offers in the college. In this instance, though, the new chair, this is a new chair, deliberative, yeah, that's cute, right? Believes that Moore's muddled seminar presentation and relatively limited teaching experience are significant issues. She also thinks that the faculty members who appreciated Moore's joviality interpreted Served's more low-key style as inexperience or lack of self-confidence. Fundamentally, she suspects that Served lost votes for being female. Liberative is about to meet with the dean to discuss her recommendation, that's you, and is mulling over how she should proceed. So what I would like for you to do is amongst yourself to address those 5 questions. So group number 1, what you get? Let's say question number 1. Matter of fact, maybe come up if you're going to report. So, because they're recording this. It would be great if we had a mic out there. The next time we do this, we're going to have like round tables, and we're going to walk around with a cordless mic. Be sure to tell them who you are.
I am Jackie Sayed. I'm from Kettering University, Michigan. So our group of 4, we just had quite a lot of discussion, and I think we learned a lot. The first one is that based upon the information provided, we think that there is evidence for Liberative's concern, And part of it is the description of a little mousey and the actual verbiage that was used in this very limited case study from what we can glean. Because we did feel that some of the things that are missing, let me just give some context, is that we don't understand the makeup of the faculty. We don't understand if it's teaching or research-based, and what it would be the difference in the background. So without that, so we decided that we really think that deliberative should endorse served. And this is based primarily on, with this very limited information we have, on the poorly organized seminar of the more senior candidate, because from our collective experience, someone who is a candidate has all the time in the world. It should be perfect, as any CV should be. So actually giving a poorly organized seminar indicates some key areas that we feel that we could fault the more senior faculty, senior candidates, sorry. How should she justify her selection to the dean? Actually being very, very honest about the lack of preparation and her concerns. And how should she justify her selection to the faculty? That this person is really, again, honest about the lack of preparation, also about a better fit. I also believe that that there should be some preparation with the faculty before searches, and then you can actually have clear expectations of what you're looking for, and that would make it easier to justify things like this with the faculty. And then the last one, we actually didn't get to it, but I can provide my own feedback.
Of course.
What should deliberative consider supporter success within the unit? Well, I think that it's very important that we create mentoring program for this junior faculty member, and also clear expectations as to promotion criteria that are shared. Clear expectation and mentoring, I think, are key to bringing in any individual with who are underrepresented in engineering in general. And I think that it is, we don't know the makeup of this faculty, but from my own experience, this is very key. The other thing is that we women, and I would speak also for other underrepresented minorities, that it's important for students and junior faculty to understand that there is a bias, because otherwise they tend to internalize this. And then when they internalize it, they don't perform as well as if they understand they're up against a certain bias, and then they just work for that. So providing that type of mentoring, I think, is key.
She must be a great dean. And we can all go home now because she laid it out. But anyway, the other groups, any dissenters or had different ways of dealing with the issue? Any of the questions?
We actually talked, this, at least for two of us, this happened 2 weeks ago.
Oh, sorry this didn't happen like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean,
I won't ask you how it worked out, but I hope it worked out well.
but a couple of the factors, I mean, that was sort of a couple of the factors that you have to look into is sort of what's the makeup of the department, what's in the past history about hiring. And for me, it's also, how, if you have faculty who are very close to retirement, we're trying to guide the process to ensure the continuation of the current way that the department is run is a real factor as well. I've seen that happen in a couple of cases where people they're going to retire and they want the department to continue to look like it does.
Some of our bigger challenges. In fact, one of the things that you brought up, I have a question for you. In your particular case, were the demographic breakdown of your faculty made available to the search committee and members of your faculty and the chair, by any chance?
Yeah, it was known. I mean,
Okay.
So that's all.
The reason I asked that question is a ulterior motive, because what I'm going to talk about a little bit later is about taking advantage of the resources in terms of your chief diversity officer that could help sort of give you the sort of information that you need so that everyone is informed when they're making these decisions and about the actual data and not just our perceptions of what that might be in terms of the demographic of your department and those sorts of things. Anyone else? Other groups? Yes.
I'd just like to add in on the one about the justify the selection of the faculty. I found it curious that the faculty vote was raised up. I mean, it's advisory. So, okay, so advice noted.
From a military man.
It's very likely that the faculty is mostly men, and therefore they are biased. And so the fact that it actually came out close to 50-50, in my mind, says that the reality is if you adjust for inequities, it's pretty clear what the outcome of the vote was. And again, it's advisory only. My guess is that I hope the vote would be confidential. And they don't even know the process. It's not, they provide their input. Thank you. Here's the final decision, and we celebrate it.
Okay. And then I'll come back to the back. Yes.
So just one more thought on that, because I was one of those who this just happened to. My inclination, and I'm curious whether it's me, is that the faculty should determine whether a candidate, if you're going to ask the faculty what their thought, what their inclination is, they should determine whether the candidate is accepted.
Yeah, that's your.
Not vote. I had a situation occur where the faculty voted was 10-9. And I argued, and I presented that to the department head as basically creating a bias toward both candidates. Because now, no matter which one you bring in, half the faculty don't want that person, the other half do. Because you actually force the faculty to make a decision. I like her over him, vice versa. And my summary on that one was, you should have never asked the faculty to do that.
We agree with
Your
that.
department head, your leadership is that you're supposed to make an intelligent decision. Just make an intelligent decision based on the acceptable candidates, not on forcing a bias to be created from day one for two candidates. So it's just a thought.
No, I mean, well, let me just say that.
Say they voted, he just says that there was a propensity of information that suggested that there was some biases.
Yeah, this is tough stuff. This is very tough stuff. We have the gentleman in the far back, and then we'll come down to you, sir.
I was going to say something very similar. I always ask for people that are acceptable, not to give me a ranked order. And the other reason is that I always tell faculty in terms of justifying this, and I ask my chairs to do this as well, to make it clear that you never want to have anybody hired that is going to hear through the grapevine, oh yeah, you were the third choice.
Make you feel real warm and welcome, right?
That is just unacceptable.
Yeah.
And that, if the candidates are acceptable, that the decision can be made with a larger viewpoint. But the other thing I was going to say was, I haven't heard anybody note it yet. The other component I've read in this that came across as very subjective, and to me clearly indicating bias, is the jovial nature of the other candidate. To me, when you have demographics that we all look at, like these numbers, who are you going to find most comfortable as people that are quote unquote like you? So that kind of subjective assessment entering into the decision-making process is just as bad as someone who's mousy, which is just pejorative, and is actually only female. I've never heard a man refer to as being mousy.
Oh, man, this is a good group. Y'all are good. Y'all been around the block a few times, huh? I think it was a hand over here.
Well, I was just going to make a comment that you may not solicit faculty vote, but the faculty they may vote. I mean, I've seen in my college that they take it upon themselves to write and let their opinion be known to everybody. So you do have that influence over them.
Yeah, the point that you made, the occupational hazard, that, because we're academicians and we really like that freedom of speech, we think we can say anything that comes to our mind, and now with the power of email and websites, we can blog and write all kinds of stuff. And that is a serious challenge for everyone on the campus. That you have this freedom, but some of us, like anything else, it cuts both ways. And how do you deal with that? And one way is to try to get in front of this. And we'll get to some of the things that you might do that might help you with that. Anybody from the panel want to chime in on any of this? Well, maybe. I mean, I'm not denying your experience. He talked about the outside letters, and actually, there's so much research on that reference letters for women and underrepresented groups tend to be shorter, less affirmative in terms of their ability. I mean, of equal, this is not anecdotal, and not as objective as we might think. I mean, this bias is such a part of who we are as a culture and as individuals. That's what makes it so dangerous, because these are well-meaning people who do believe in their hearts of heart that they're being totally objective and would be totally offended, and I'm not saying, obviously, some people probably have reached that level because they've gone through this sort of training and done the self-reflection and all that sort of stuff, and that's what we're working for. But it is really, really tough. And I'm actually going to give you some suggestions about that. But from folks out there, any more comments about that? Yes. But I hear what you're saying.
Even when a vote like this may be ill-advised but still gets handed to me, I've been known both as a department chair and a dean to go back into that group and say, look, we're a collection of very talented, very educated professionals, and we've come to a decision that's essentially equivalent to a coin flip. I think we need to talk about this more, and that's generally started to bring out more of the points that are behind how that choice was made, and I think it's something that will be called for here. Earlier, you brought up a point that stuck with me through this conversation about good fit. Because as you go up the line, through administrative searches, I hear committees talking a lot about, well, we're concerned about the fit of this person for the institution.
Big three-letter word.
And as we're trying to look for ways to change the environment, really, my question is, where is that good balance between a need for collegiality, a need for a team environment and supporting that, and really something that can challenge the status quo in a professional environment?
Well, that's the whole point. It's really about bias more than about diversity per se. In fact, and you go to this website, they have a bunch of them, and they're really laid out very nicely. Really good stuff. But I'm going to have to wrap this up because she's like cracking the whip over there, and rightfully so, because I'm like a half hour over. But thank you for your engagement. But let me just sort of jump to the end here, that for one, the responses that you've given, a response to something like this, there are a number of right answers, and that right answer will be what's right for your institution, and there are infinite number of wrong answers, and I think by and large, I actually have the possible responses to these. Let me see if I can find them. Okay, possible responses, but I'm not going to go through them. They're lengthy because you hit all of them, and you can have this slide, and it sort of describes something you talked about. The bias, the gender bias sort of thing. We talked about ways in which the dean can help this female chairperson, do her thing and do the leadership role and what have you. So, and I had another case study, but we ain't gonna do that. So let me go back to the stuff that might help you. Recommendations to reduce the influence of bias. Number one, and they're not, the order is, I think, is arbitrary. And once again, this is from this brochure on research and bias and assumptions. Increase the representation of women and underrepresented groups in the applicant pool. And where that comes from, according to the research, if you have an applicant pool with about 25% women, you have a higher chance of hiring women. That's what the research says. So getting back to your point and to your point, by getting more of these folks in that initial pool, it increases your chance of them being successfully hired. Discuss research on bias and assumptions and ways to minimize their influence in evaluation. That goes back to your point, actually to all of you making that point, that this is not something that you do when you're doing the search. This is something you have to do all the time at your faculty meetings, at, whether it's departmental or school-wide, to talk about these things and to share this information, this research, so it's not coming out of ether. You as a dean are not making this up, that this stuff is real. Because that's one of the biggest things, because most of our faculties just are so certain that I have no biases. What are you talking about? I've been doing this for 30 years. You've been doing it wrong for 30 years, So, number 3, develop and prioritize evaluation criteria before evaluating candidates and apply them consistently to all applicants. That is so key. Because what happens is you don't establish what those criteria are. As you are sort of reviewing those candidates, your team, and you can have an integrated or a diverse search committee, will begin to shift and apply arbitrarily, what suits them, that fits their narrative of who should be the right candidate. So if you establish that first up front, and talk about it and really adhere to that, that helps to reduce that. So you talk about the criteria that are important to that program. 4, spend sufficient time evaluating each applicant. In this particular case, they say at least 20 minutes. And really look at the applicant and look at those criteria. And I know that's a challenge because I mentioned this earlier. Your faculty is going to say, I need release time, this takes too much time, but you have to, encourage them and explain to them how important this is, because what you're doing is not just this hire, but you're talking about something that's very expensive in terms of human capital, meaning your search committee. You're talking about money. You're talking about millions of dollars that you're going to spend on this individual and developing them and paying their salary and benefits and all those stuff, and being on your academic institution, depending if they're a faculty member, maybe 20, 30 years, a lifetime. So you want to do it right. And so you want to make your faculty understand their responsibility in creating that culture. Number 5, evaluate each candidate's entire application. Some people will focus on letters, some people will focus on research, some folks will focus, no, look at the whole thing, but that goes back to before you do your evaluation to establish what those criteria are so that you're consistent, and then do it thoroughly. Number 6, be able, this is key, this is that feedback, that self-reflection, be able to defend every decision for eliminating or advancing a candidate with yourself and amongst the members in your search committee. Defend it. That's real easy, what is your argument for allowing this to do? And as deans, you probably have done that. When you've made decisions, you're going to have to talk to that provost, her or him, and you say, now how I'm going to defend it. It's the same thing here, and you have to imbue this with your faculty. Number 7, periodically evaluate your judgments, that self-reflection for the effects of bias and assumptions. And on that note, I want to thank you all for being such a great audience. Your schools are very fortunate to have you, and I guess we go to the break, or you...